My name is Amber Collins, I'm 32 years old, and last month, the same message I've grown to expect every summer arrived like clockwork. Sorry, sweetie, not enough room for you at the Lake Tahoe getaway this year. Within hours, I learned the truth. My parents had welcomed 118 attendees. Every one of my 6 siblings, their spouses, their children, in-laws, cousins, even distant acquaintances. Everyone, except me. The pattern was unmistakable. Despite a thriving design business and an independent life I'd built with my own hands, I remained the outlier. The forgotten daughter. The afterthought. But this time? I made a different choice. Before diving in, leave a comment with where you're watching from. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that subscribe button. What happened next changed everything. The Lake Tahoe retreat wasn't just another vacation, it was sacred. A legacy. My grandparents, Eleanor and Robert Collins, started the tradition nearly 4 decades ago after falling in love with the Sapphire Lake and towering pines during their honeymoon. It became their dream to one day share it with future generations. When I turned 6, they purchased a sprawling cabin nestled against the water. From that moment on, it became our collective sanctuary. Some of my earliest, happiest recollections were etched into those summer mornings. Racing barefoot toward the dock with my brothers and sisters, squealing as the cold spray hit our faces. Jake, the eldest, always organizing wild treasure hunts across the vast 10-acre property. Amanda and Heather helped Grandma whip up massive, home-cooked feasts, filling the air with garlic and laughter. Blake and Brian, the twins, usually found themselves hanging precariously from pine branches. And Lily, the youngest, never left Grandpa's side as he gardened, but it was me he chose for something else. He noticed my fascination with colors, patterns, and form before anyone else. Amber, he'd say, adjusting the tiny canvas he'd set up for me, you have a way of seeing the world others miss. I remember those quiet mornings spent painting mountain reflections on the lake's surface while Grandpa sat beside me silently, only breaking the stillness to offer encouragement. Your creativity will take you far. Never let anyone tell you it's not enough. When I announced I was pursuing art school instead of joining the business program my parents had picked, Grandpa and Grandma were the only ones who celebrated. My father, Richard Collins, CEO of a regional banking empire, openly sneered. Art doesn't pay bills. My mother, Patricia, echoed him like always. Their approval was conditional, attached to prestige and conformity. I didn't fit their mold. The summer following my sophomore year, we lost both grandparents. Within months, they were gone. Though the grief was heavy, they'd left the Lake Tahoe home in my parents' care, along with a heartfelt letter asking for the annual gatherings to continue. And they did, but not in the way they were meant to. Where joy once flowed freely, now came formal seating charts, dress codes, and catered meals. The guest list grew. Strangers were invited in place of actual connection. Friends of friends, clients, golf buddies. What had once been the emotional center of our family had transformed into a social showcase. Still, I persisted. I poured myself into my craft. During college, while others partied, I built a portfolio, landed freelance gigs, and networked hard. By graduation, I had secured clients in tech, fashion, and interior design. Today, I lead a thriving agency and collaborate with luxury brands, designing everything from logos to immersive event visuals. But no matter how successful I became, my parents remained unmoved. My accomplishments never seemed to register. 3 years ago, the first digital rejection came. We're keeping it small this year. Only close family. Maybe next time. I tried to believe it. Told myself they needed space. That I was too busy anyway. I didn't need a lake house to feel loved. But that night, I sobbed into my pillow. Then, days later, pictures surfaced online, group shots, dinner tables, lake games. More than 60 smiling faces. Everyone was there. Except me. When I mentioned it to Amanda, her reply was defensive. You're always working. They figured you wouldn't come anyway. I nodded, too tired to argue. But inside, something fractured. Each sibling has their niche within the family ecosystem. Jake is Dad's protege. Amanda organizes everything. Heather plays peacemaker. The twins crack jokes. Lily's the angel child. But me? I was the footnote. The one who chose a different path. And for that, I was quietly erased, but not this time. This time, I had a plan. Amanda, at 36, married a renowned cosmetic surgeon and seamlessly stepped into the role of polished, philanthropic spouse, echoing our mother's meticulously curated persona. The twins, Blake and Brian, 34, pursued law, Dad's unrelenting ambition guiding their careers straight into one of the top firms in the state. Heather, 2 years my junior, practices pediatric medicine and married a fellow physician. A union that earned instant admiration from our parents. Lily, the youngest, now 28, teaches elementary school and wed her university sweetheart, a financial consultant with an impeccable portfolio. Then, there's me, Amber, 32. No husband, no children, building a thriving design company while being labeled a rebellious failure. According to my father, managing a creative studio doesn't equate to having an actual career. In their eyes, I was the deviation from their blueprint. Every June for 2 consecutive summers, I received the same polite but hollow message. Not enough accommodations this year. Yet, each time, Instagram painted a different picture. Images showed sprawling gatherings filled with relatives, family acquaintances, and distant friends. My absence, I realized, wasn't an oversight, it was calculated. I tried pretending I didn't care. I buried myself in projects, reassured myself that my independence was a strength. Still, the ache remained. This time, however, the pain hit differently. While browsing Instagram one quiet night, my heart sank. Blake had uploaded a snapshot of the upcoming retreat's printed agenda, captioned, "Can't wait. Biggest one yet." Curious, I enlarged the image. There it was, group activities mapped out in detail and, at the very top, the number, 118. Confirmed attendees. 118. And I wasn't among them. My hands trembled as I examined the list. All my siblings were included, spouses, offspring, cousins, long-lost relatives, even family friends I hadn't seen since high school. My mother's sister and her children. An old fraternity buddy of my father and his wife. Practically everyone who'd ever crossed paths with us, except me. I messaged Blake. "Looks incredible. That's quite a crowd." He replied in seconds. "It's gonna be huge. Mom and Dad really went all in this time." Feigning curiosity, I responded, "Wow, 118 folks? Must be packed." Blake answered without hesitation, "Yeah, Dad's been scrambling to fit everyone. He even booked 2 extra houses nearby." I froze. 2 additional properties? That was the final blow. The "not enough room" narrative shattered completely. I stared out my San Francisco window, city lights blurring behind teardrops. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been excluded, intentionally, deliberately. My breath quickened, chest tightening as I sank to the floor, knees drawn up beneath me. Recollections of being overlooked swirled through my mind. Like the time my artwork received national acclaim and neither parent attended the ceremony. Or the holiday when everyone else got personalized gifts and I was handed a preloaded gift card with no note. I remembered family portraits where I'd been placed on the fringe, easily cropped out, easily erased. Eventually, I picked up the phone and called Grace. We'd supported each other since art school, her friendship one of my life's most constant sources of strength. "They left me out again," I whispered as soon as she picked up. "Same retreat. But worse this time." Grace didn't hesitate. "Oh no, Amber. 118 guests," I choked out. "They expanded. Rented additional homes to accommodate everyone." "That's not ignorance," she said softly. "That's deliberate cruelty." "Am I being too sensitive?" I asked, still hoping for any excuse that didn't hurt as much. "No," Grace responded firmly. "They're punishing you for daring to build something different. For choosing passion over conformity." Her words hit hard because I already knew they were true. My success was invisible to them, dismissed because it didn't look the way they'd imagined it should. Later that evening, restless and unable to sleep, I sat with the weight of 1,000 unspoken hurts. The Thanksgiving when Dad announced everyone's latest career milestones, describing me merely as still doing something with art. The Mother's Day brunch where Mom talked about wanting more grandchildren, then glanced sideways at me and said, "Well, you've got to find a husband first, dear." Every jab, every slight, every loaded comment replayed in my mind like a broken reel. At 3 in the morning, unable to bear it alone, I dialed Amanda. Her newborn usually kept her up around that time, and sure enough, she answered. "I wasn't invited to Tahoe," I said flatly. A pause. "Mom said you were working. That you'd be too busy." "No one asked," I said. "They didn't check. Didn't bother. You know how it is," she murmured. "They handled the guest list. Amanda, they rented overflow housing. They had space for dozens of extras. What's the excuse now?" Another beat of silence. "Maybe they just don't get your lifestyle." "You mean my thriving business? My independence? The career I built from scratch without their help?" "That's not what I meant," she said, voice low. "You've always just been, well, different." "Different isn't a justification for abandonment," I replied. "I didn't choose their path, so they cast me out of the story entirely." "Maybe call Mom tomorrow," she offered weakly. "Maybe. Or maybe it was time to stop asking for space at someone else's table and build my own. I'm sure this must be an oversight." I ended the call without offering a reply. But it wasn't an oversight. It was a well-established habit I had silently tolerated for far too long. Dawn arrived after another restless evening, bringing with it a strange sense of resolution. Sunlight filtered through my apartment blinds as I brewed coffee, its scent grounding me. Framed accolades lined my workspace, proof that my efforts, creativity, and persistence had borne fruit. I'd constructed a meaningful career, upheld the encouragement my grandparents once gave me, and continued chasing validation from those unwilling to see my worth. A quiet spark ignited, not fueled by confrontation, begging, or revenge, but something more intentional. If they wouldn't offer a seat at the table, perhaps it was time I built my own. Initial instinct screamed for vengeance. I imagined confronting my parents, exposing their repeated slights publicly, crashing their beloved getaway uninvited. But as I took a sip from my favorite mug and gazed at a weathered photo of Grandma and Grandpa on my desk, I realized none of those responses aligned with who I had become. My grandmother often quoted Maya Angelou, "When someone reveals their character, believe it." My family had shown me repeatedly where I ranked in their priorities. No outburst would shift that truth. I dialed Diane, once my favorite instructor in art school, now a trusted industry mentor. We connected over a video call, and as soon as her familiar face appeared, words tumbled out. I recounted everything, my voice catching more than once. "I can't keep acting like I'm fine with this," I said, staring at my reflection in the screen. Diane adjusted her signature red-framed glasses and leaned forward. "You're a visionary, Amber. When surrounded by rubble, visionaries construct beauty. When excluded, they foster belonging. When belittled, they rise through brilliance." "What are you telling me to do?" I asked. "If I were in your shoes," she said with a knowing smile, "I'd craft something spectacular. Make your grandparents proud. Show yourself what you're capable of." After our chat ended, I opened my laptop and began searching for high-end rentals near Lake Tahoe. If my parents could lease multiple homes, why couldn't I? Not to compete, but to begin a new, reshaped tradition, reframe legacy. That's when I discovered it. The Emerald Bay Estate. Elegant. Remote. 6 luxurious bedrooms. Expansive lakefront views. Private shoreline. And, miraculously, still unbooked. For the exact week of their retreat, the price tag made me hesitate, but I'd been saving toward purchasing a condo. This, however, felt like the investment I truly needed. The following afternoon, I met Rachel for lunch. She owned a booming event planning firm and had been a client-turned-friend after I rebranded her entire business. "You're serious?" she asked, eyes wide as I outlined my concept. "Not just any getaway," I replied. "A sanctuary for creatives. A gathering of artists, designers, makers. A space to recharge, connect, and dream, just like Grandpa intended before it became a social circus." Rachel's entire expression shifted. "I'm in," she said. "Let's make it unforgettable." We brainstormed for hours. She recommended local chefs she'd worked with who could craft elevated meals. I envisioned fellow creatives hosting sessions, painting, photography, storytelling. We sketched out possibilities: morning yoga on the deck, lake cruises, nature hikes, evening fireside chats with live music under the stars. "You need branding," Rachel said. "Website, aesthetic, cohesive identity. It has to feel elite but inviting." "I've got that handled," I grinned, already mapping the layout in my mind. Over the next 7 days, I arranged for time off from my studio, shifted funds from my savings, and secured the deposit. Then I built a digital invitation that mirrored the essence of what I envisioned: warmth, sophistication, creativity. Crafting the guest list required careful thought. Grace was the obvious first name. Then came close friends from school, longtime collaborators, select clients who had become part of my journey. Even my old roommate and her husband made the cut. After some soul-searching, I also extended invitations to Heather and Jake, siblings who had, on occasion, recognized my work and treated me with basic respect. With each added name, my enthusiasm grew. I wasn't just creating a vacation. I was curating healing, rewriting legacy, and reclaiming my place in a story that had tried to erase me. These were individuals who embraced my identity as it was, not molded, not revised. They applauded my triumphs rather than diminishing them with backhanded remarks or silence. They offered presence, not conditional acceptance. With that in mind, I launched a full-scale campaign to bring this vision to life. I developed a refined website showcasing vivid images of the estate, comprehensive outlines of every planned session, and well-crafted introductions for each expert leading an activity. I also opened private social platforms for participants, giving them a space to interact and stay updated. Despite that momentum, insecurities crept in during quiet hours. Would anyone genuinely attend? Would people see this as some desperate attempt to recreate familial bonds? Could I afford to fail? Would this dream leave me financially drained and emotionally raw? Every time doubt surfaced, I circled back to one core belief: my sense of value could not be dictated by those who refused to see it. 2 weeks after Blake's viral Instagram post, I had confirmed 22 attendees for the inaugural Creative Minds retreat. It would take place during the exact days my family gathered elsewhere. Heather enthusiastically messaged back, "This is exactly what I've been craving. Honestly, I prefer this vibe." Jake politely declined, explaining his kids were already committed to the family plans but thanked me for the thoughtful gesture. As the logistics finalized, I sensed something unusual: peace. Not bitterness, not aching. Just direction. For once, I wasn't scrambling for attention or mourning another missed invite. I was sculpting something meaningful from the ashes of dismissal. Booking Emerald Bay Estate had been only the opening move in a multi-layered orchestration. The residence was breathtaking: sleek glass walls that embraced the sapphire shoreline, a gourmet kitchen built for brilliance, expansive patios made for fireside chats, and its own pier with 2 sleek vessels ready for adventure. But elegance alone wouldn't bring this idea to life. Execution meant precision. Rachel proved indispensable, leveraging her deep network to secure professionals at discounted rates. Together we landed an organic catering company with a locally sourced menu, locked in cleaning services for daily upkeep, and even brought on a lifestyle photographer to chronicle the entire journey. "People need to see this," Rachel emphasized. "Not just the Collinses, anyone who's ever been shut out needs to witness this kind of reclamation." Evenings became a flurry of coordination. Once my daytime obligations wrapped up, I threw myself into crafting workshop packets, syncing schedules, confirming supplies. Miranda, a nationally acclaimed sculptor, would lead clay artistry on the patio overlooking the forest. Troy, an adventurous lensman, would guide early risers on wilderness photography treks. Grace would run expressive writing sessions around inner resilience. Everything was intentional. I aimed to reflect the legacy of my grandparents: their warmth, their magic, their ability to make ordinary gatherings feel like treasured chapters in an evolving family story. I recalled Grandpa Robert's starry night tales on the dock, wrapped in quilts, pointing constellations. I remembered Grandma Eleanor collecting blooms in mason jars for every room. They taught me that what elevates a space isn't extravagance, but thoughtfulness. As payments came due, the financial pinch grew sharper. I picked up extra contracts, working past midnight to balance the books. I wrestled with questions: was I letting wounded pride steer me too far? Was this indulgence or healing? Then I'd receive a grateful message from a guest: "Thank you for including me," or "This sounds like a dream," and I'd feel grounded again. Then, a setback. With only 7 days left, the caterer abruptly cancelled, double-booked, unavailable. I sat cross-legged in my living room, surrounded by DIY welcome basket materials, on the verge of tears. I phoned Grace, my voice thick. "I don't know how to fix this. 22 people, 5 full days, no food plan." Grace didn't panic. "Breathe. It's not over. Let me pull some strings." Within hours, she connected me with Sophia, a talented private chef, classically trained, currently in between contracts. After reviewing the meal concepts I'd drafted, she not only accepted, but offered upgrades that elevated the culinary side of the retreat even further. The crisis had become a hidden blessing. On the eve of arrival day, I loaded my car to the brim: bedding, supplies, decor, printed materials. As I took the driver's seat, ready to head toward the life I was crafting, I looked in the rearview mirror and smiled. What lay ahead was mine, built with courage, not invitation. As I turned into the curved drive leading to Emerald Bay Estate, golden light bathed the architecture in a soft, radiant glow. Before stepping out, I paused, hands resting on the steering wheel, absorbing the magnitude of what I had set into motion. It wasn't merely a vacation rental, it represented reclamation, healing, and the beginning of something entirely mine. The property manager walked me through the expansive interior, explaining features, codes, and schedules before departing. With a friendly nod and the keys. Alone in the great room, I gazed through towering windows that opened to shimmering lake water. For 7 days, this haven was under my care, and I had full control over its atmosphere, its spirit. The rest of the afternoon was a whirlwind of preparation. I assembled individualized welcome gifts in woven baskets, layering them with handcrafted soaps from a local artisan, miniature bottles of regional wine, curated chocolates, personalized journals bearing the retreat emblem I designed, and handwritten messages expressing my gratitude. For Heather, I tucked in an old photo of us painting side by side as kids, 2 girls caught in a moment of pure innocence on Grandpa Robert's porch. As I arranged each gift in a guest suite, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother lit up the screen: "Hope you're enjoying summer, sweetheart. Got anything planned for next week?" Her casual tone confirmed what I had suspected: they hadn't noticed I knew about the retreat. They assumed I'd stay quiet, as always. I didn't reply. Instead, I captured the sunset glowing over the water from the deck and shared it on Instagram. The caption was simple but intentional: "Let the creative mind's retreat begin." Hashtag emerging from the DAOs. My siblings followed my account. Word would reach them. For the first time, I wasn't masking my pain, I was stepping into the truth without shame. Guests began arriving just before midday. Grace was the first, pulling up in her vintage Volvo, her eyes widening as she stepped into the foyer. Moments later, Troy and his husband David followed. They're always immediate. "Amber, this place is unreal," Grace breathed, scanning the vaulted ceilings and panoramic views. "You really did this." Throughout the afternoon, familiar faces filtered in, friends I hadn't hugged in years, collaborators turned confidants, each entering with warmth and wonder. Laughter echoed through the open rooms as they explored the layout, commented on the thoughtful touches, and admired the schedule I'd printed and posted near the kitchen. The air inside transformed with each arrival, becoming charged with creative excitement. This was the atmosphere I'd envisioned. Not just a gathering, but an ecosystem of shared inspiration. Sophia appeared with 2 assistants, setting up in the gleaming kitchen to prepare our opening dinner. As I guided people to their rooms, offered drinks, and caught up with old friends, every interaction reinforced that this beautiful collection of moments was worth every sleepless night. By the time the sun dipped below the pines, all 22 attendees had arrived. Heather wrapped me in a heartfelt embrace the second she stepped through the doorway. "I had no idea you were putting something like this together," she whispered. "It's breathtaking." "Did anyone say anything about my post?" I asked. Careful to keep my voice even, she hesitated before responding. "Mom saw it. She asked if I knew what was going on. I told her I'd be with you this week." I nodded. Her discretion spoke volumes. "Thank you for being here. It matters." That night's dinner surpassed expectations. Sophia delivered a feast: seasonal produce, fresh seafood, handcrafted desserts, each dish plated with elegance and care. We dined al fresco beneath strands of glowing bulbs, the lake shimmering beside us, the table surrounded by voices rising in joy and connection. When dessert arrived, I rose to speak. Looking around, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: inclusion. To fresh starts, to imagination, to spaces where every person belongs. I toasted, raising my glass. As plates were cleared and conversations lingered, phones emerged. Guests captured moments, posted glimpses of the estate, shared quotes from dinner. By morning, my notifications were flooded. First came Blake: "That place looks insane. What's this retreat about?" Then Amanda: "FYI, Mom's asking why Heather's not here." Did something happen? I didn't rush to reply. The morning was already in motion. David led yoga as the sunrise painted the sky, while a breakfast spread of berries, pastries, and espresso awaited on the deck. Troy guided a small group through forest trails, cameras in hand, while Miranda rolled out her ceramic station, inviting participants to mold and shape clay under the open sky. I stayed present, immersed in the rhythm of it all. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every breath taken among tall trees and kindred spirits told me one thing: I had created something real. Brian's message came mid-morning: "Saw the pictures. Looks incredible. Didn't realize you had something planned this week." His curiosity was transparent. The unspoken question hung in the digital air: why wasn't I included? But I had no interest in appeasing guilt or explaining myself anymore. The Real surprise arrived on the 3rd afternoon. We were returning from a tranquil lake cruise when I noticed an elegant figure waiting near the dock. It took several seconds to recognize her, my great-aunt Eleanor, namesake and longtime kindred spirit. Her posture was still proud despite the years, her silver hair pinned in its familiar French twist. "Aunt Eleanor?" I exclaimed, rushing over to assist her up the steps. "What are you doing here?" "I saw snapshots of this place on that Instagram thing," she said with her trademark amused tone, waving dismissively. "Recognized the view. I was supposed to be at your parents' event, but this seemed far more compelling." At 84, Eleanor had always carved her own path, traveling globally as a journalist when societal norms encouraged domesticity. She had adored my grandparents and had always shown genuine appreciation for my work. That night, long after others had drifted to their rooms, she and I sat wrapped in blankets on the deck, passing a bottle of aged scotch between us. "They'd be bursting with pride, you know," she said out of nowhere. "Not just for organizing all this," she nodded at the glowing lights behind us, "but for staying true to who you are, even when Richard and Patricia failed to see your worth." I blinked. "You knew about that?" She gave a dry chuckle. "Of course I did. I've watched them elevate your siblings and disregard you for years. Your grandparents noticed too. It hurt them deeply." The recognition broke something loose inside me. My voice was thick when I confessed, "I've spent so long trying to earn what they never seemed willing to offer." Eleanor poured another measure into my glass. Some people's praise isn't worth chasing, she said without hesitation. Your gift isn't just what you create, it's how you perceive the world. They didn't understand it, but your grandparents did. So, do I. That conversation grounded me. It realigned my purpose. This wasn't retaliation, it was restoration. I hadn't created the retreat to prove anything. I had done it to embrace the pieces of myself they refused to acknowledge. The following afternoon, as we gathered for a light lunch on the terrace, my phone vibrated with a familiar name. My mother. I ignored it. Seconds later, another attempt. On the third call, I stepped away from the group and answered, "Amber, where are you?" Her voice was tight with that practiced calm that usually preceded confrontation. "Eleanor hasn't checked in. We've been trying to reach her since yesterday." "She's with me," I said plainly. Silence. "With you? What do you mean?" "I'm hosting my own retreat. She decided to join us instead." "You're in Tahoe?" The disbelief in her tone made me almost laugh. "Yes. Not far from your gathering." "But, we told you that there wasn't space," I finished. "Except there was. 118 attendees. Additional homes rented. Let's not pretend this was about logistics, Mom." Another pause. "We need to talk. Your father and I are coming over." Before I could argue, the call ended. Back at the house, I tried to center myself, but Grace spotted the tension immediately. "They're coming," I murmured. "They just learned where I am." Grace took my hand. "You won't face this alone." Exactly 1 hour later, a sleek black car pulled into the driveway. I met them at the entrance, not wanting to disrupt the ceramics session underway inside. My father stepped out first, followed by my mother, who surveyed the estate with thinly veiled disapproval. "What exactly is this?" she asked, her gaze moving from the architecture to the people inside. "A retreat," I replied evenly. "For peers, collaborators, and friends." "You weren't excluded," my father insisted, bristling. "We just couldn't accommodate one more. While you hosted over 100 and secured more space for others?" I said quietly. "Let's not rewrite the narrative, Dad." My mother looked momentarily flustered. "We assumed you'd be buried in work. You're always so focused." "My work is my profession. A thriving one." "You've never acknowledged that, not once." For the first time in years, I let it all out, not angrily, but honestly. "You've downplayed everything I've built. You've erased me from gatherings. You've dismissed my achievements and minimized my presence. This isn't just about this year, it's about all the years." My father opened his mouth, then paused. Through the massive windows behind me, he saw Miranda's workshop in full swing, guests laughing as they shaped clay, the atmosphere alive with creativity. "Who are all these people?" he asked, almost to himself. "Individuals who appreciate me," I said without flinching. "Supportive friends. Clients turned allies. People who welcome me into their lives without conditions." "And Heather's here too," I added, watching their expressions change. She chose to attend this retreat instead. My mother's lips parted in disbelief. "Amber, if you felt neglected, why didn't you speak up?" I held her gaze. "Would that have made any difference?" My father dropped his eyes, scanning the deck, the decorations, the atmosphere. I saw it hit him, the scale, the intention, the success built from their silence. "We should talk about this," he said eventually, his voice quieter. "I'm hosting an event," I responded calmly. "Now isn't the time." And for the first time, they had no argument. "My attention belongs to my guests," I said calmly. "You're welcome to stay for dinner, on one condition. You'll attend as visitors, not as parents here to lecture their daughter." They exchanged glances, visibly taken aback by the confident woman standing before them, self-assured, composed, unapologetically drawing lines. "Dinner is at 7. I added before turning toward the house. "Amber, my father called." I paused but didn't turn. "This is impressive," he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "It wasn't an apology, but considering it came from Richard Collins, it carried weight." I nodded once and stepped back inside, into warmth, acceptance, and authenticity. That evening, they returned, noticeably stiff. The awkwardness clung to them like static, until Aunt Eleanor joined the group. Her ease with everyone, her natural charm, softened the edges of discomfort. As conversation flowed and laughter sparked, my parents observed, watched as others spoke with admiration about my design studio, my leadership, my vision. They heard the words they'd never spoken themselves, echoed by those who knew me best. By the end of the meal, something had undeniably shifted. Not a dramatic reversal, but a softening. A dent in the armor. As they prepared to leave, my mother turned and said, "We'll make sure there's room for you next year." I gave a polite smile. Inside, I already knew, I wasn't interested in squeezing into a space I'd never been welcome in. I'd created something greater. I wouldn't abandon that for a seat at their table. Over the following days, my phone buzzed with responses. Brian's message carried mild offense over being left out. Lily, ever detached, expressed confusion. Amanda predictably defended our parents. Jake, surprisingly, wrote a kind note acknowledging the ways I'd been overlooked. But the real surprise came from Blake. He arrived unannounced on the final day. Told Mom and Dad I needed a breather, he said, sheepishly. Truth is, I wanted to see this for myself. It looks incredible. I showed him around, introduced him to everyone, watched him soak in the atmosphere. Something softened in him too. As he mingled with guests, I glimpsed the version of him that had existed before he'd been molded into someone else's ideal. With the retreat drawing to a close, its success echoed around me. Guests asked about future dates. New partnerships were budding. Friendships had deepened. I'd proven, to them, to myself, that joy, connection, and belonging could be cultivated outside bloodlines. On the final morning, I spotted my parents' SUV again. This time, Amanda was with them. I met them outside, prepared to protect the boundaries I'd worked so hard to build. We thought we'd help with packing, my mother offered, her tone light but forced. That won't be necessary. I replied. Everything's handled. Amanda stepped forward. Can we speak privately? I hesitated, then nodded, leading them into the garden. Pine shadows danced across the stone path as sunlight filtered through the branches. This whole thing's gone too far, Amanda began. You've made Mom and Dad feel horrible. That wasn't my goal, I said quietly. I just decided I wouldn't tolerate being sidelined anymore. There was confusion about the accommodations. My mother tried again. Mom, I said gently, we both know that wasn't the truth. It never has been. Surprisingly, it was my father who broke the silence. You're right. The air shifted. He repeated it, firmer this time. We've made mistakes. We prioritized what made sense to us and overlooked what mattered to you. We didn't see your path as valid. That was wrong. The honesty stunned me. I searched his face, and for once, saw no pride, no defensiveness, just clarity. Thank you, I said. That acknowledgement means something. He looked toward the house. This gathering, these people, you've built something real. I can see that now. My mother dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue. It just always seemed so uncertain, what you do. We didn't understand it. No, I said. You never tried to. You never asked about my exhibitions, my clients, or the work I've poured my heart into. I was wrong, my father admitted. And I'm sorry. Hearing those words from him was like watching the impossible unfold in slow motion. I don't expect miracles overnight. He continued. But I want to learn. I want to be part of your world, if you'll let me. Amanda stood silently, clearly uneasy watching our father expose any kind of vulnerability. But for once, I wasn't managing her feelings. I was living my truth, and finally, they were seeing it. So, will you be coming to the family retreat next year? My mother asked gently, as though tiptoeing past the weight of everything we'd just unpacked. I paused. Her question wasn't unwelcome, but it deserved thought. I'm not sure, I answered honestly. I might host another retreat of my own. This has been more than therapeutic, it's been transformative. We could coordinate dates, she suggested. So there's no overlap. Maybe you could attend both, or at least part of each. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was something real. A tentative extension of peace. I'll consider that, I said softly, just as Grace appeared at the edge of the garden. Sorry to intrude, she said with a warm smile. We're ready for the closing circle whenever you are. I'll be right there. I turned back to my parents and Amanda. You're welcome to join us for the closing ceremony. Not as spectators, but as participants. Surprisingly, my father nodded without hesitation. We'd like that. As we walked back toward the house, Amanda leaned in and whispered, Blake hasn't stopped talking about yesterday. He said it's the first time in years he's felt like himself. The closing circle, something I'd adapted from my art school rituals, was meant to offer a space for reflection and closure. We sat in a wide ring, pillows scattered around the great room. One by one, each person shared thoughts about the retreat, what it had meant to them, what they were taking home. When it was my parents' turn, my father cleared his throat. Public speaking's not really my thing, unless I'm giving a quarterly update, he joked, earning a wave of laughter. But I need to thank Amber. This experience, being here, seeing this, it's opened my eyes to a world I never took the time to understand. After the circle, while guests mingled, trading contact info and taking final photos, my parents approached once more. We'd like to have dinner next week, my mom said. Just the three of us. To talk more? I'd like that, I replied, then added, but you need to hear this, I'm not changing to earn your approval. I've stopped negotiating with myself to fit someone else's expectations. My father didn't flinch. We understand, he said. Maybe, it's us who need to do the changing. Once they left, I rejoined the group for our final lunch. Aunt Eleanor, seated beside me, gave me a knowing smile. You know, darling, she said, sipping her iced tea, sometimes the family you choose matters more than the one you're born into. I glanced around at the table, people from different places, different lives, united by intention and warmth. I think you're right. She patted my hand, her tone gentle but steady. But when both kinds of family can exist side by side, well, that's even better. Give them the chance. Not for their benefit. For your peace. Throughout the afternoon, guests began departing. Heather was among the final few. She hugged me tightly. This has changed something in me, she whispered. I've been so caught up in making mom and dad proud, I forgot what it feels like to be creative just for the joy of it. I forgot how much I missed you. You'll always have a place at my table, I said. Blake had decided to stay an extra night and helped me box up supplies. As we shut the back door together, he turned to me. I'm sorry, Amber. I looked at him, puzzled. What for? For? Not realizing how much pain you were in. For playing along with it all. He didn't look like the high-powered attorney anymore. I saw the boy who used to help me build driftwood forts and draw chalk murals on the driveway. We all miss things, I said. But maybe we can do better now. He nodded, eyes soft. Yeah, I'd like that. As dusk painted the lake in golden hues, I stood alone on the deck of Emerald Bay Estate. The week had given me more than I ever expected. New connections. Affirmation. Peace. I had taken pain and turned it into possibility. Transformed exclusion into belonging. Turned resentment into resilience. I didn't know what the future held for my family, but I knew what I'd built here was mine. Not a response to rejection, but a celebration of worth. When I turned the key in the lock for the final time, I felt something shift inside. A quiet sense of release. Of clarity, for my grandparents who had nurtured my creative soul, for the friends who had stood by me, even for the years of feeling unseen. They had led me here. As I drove back to San Francisco, every mile behind the wheel was a mile reclaimed. The winding descent from Tahoe traced each mile with a quiet sort of reflection. As the mountains receded behind me, I didn't feel like I was returning to the same life I'd left behind. I was bringing something new home. The retreat hadn't just been a calendar event. It had been a crossroads. A transformation. When I stepped into my apartment, everything looked familiar, yet something had shifted. The walls that had echoed my private disappointments now absorbed the energy of someone who had redefined what it meant to belong. I moved through the space slowly, methodically unpacking the remnants of a week that had restructured my reality. Extra welcome basket items, unused program pamphlets, printed menus, snapshots from group outings. These weren't just souvenirs, they were proof of purpose. Messages from attendees began pouring in by the next morning. Each email, voice note, and social media tag carried the same undercurrent: gratitude, inspiration, excitement. Troy shared that a local gallery owner had been captivated by his lake photographs and offered him a solo exhibition. Miranda excitedly mentioned that 2 guests had requested large-scale custom ceramic installations for their homes. Grace, ever the community builder, had already formed a group chat with everyone from the retreat. Creative Minds alumni, she called it. What began as a personal response to isolation had evolved into something far bigger, a collective, a safe harbor, a declaration that not being welcome doesn't mean you stop creating. You build your own circle. You redefine belonging. You extend the invitation to yourself. A week later, I kept my promise and went to dinner at my parents' home in San Francisco. I arrived not with defensiveness, but with clarity. Their familiar living room felt less intimidating now. The evening unfolded with moments of unease, small pockets of silence where years of unspoken tension still lingered, but there was something else, too: curiosity. My father leaned forward during our conversation and asked specific, thoughtful questions about my business. Real questions. Not the vague politeness I'd grown used to. My mother showed me a ceramic bowl she'd purchased from a local artisan and genuinely asked my opinion about the glaze work. Her eyes weren't skeptical, they were seeking something. Connection, maybe. Over dessert, my father cleared his throat, clearly gearing up for something more serious. We've been thinking about the retreat, he said, cutting into his slice of pie. It's become something different than what your grandparents imagined. It's gotten too big, too formal. Too many distant relatives and business associates. We want to pare it down, my mother added. Just the immediate family again. Keep it intimate, the way it was when you were little. It was the kind of offer I'd longed for once. Now, I could accept it without needing it. I smiled. That sounds lovely. But then came the unexpected. My father hesitated before continuing. We were also wondering if we might visit your retreat next year. Just for a day or two. To see it. To understand. The request caught me completely off guard. My parents willingly stepping into a space curated by and for creatives? That was not a version of them I'd ever known. It's not really a corporate conference, I replied gently, unsure of their expectations. We know, he said. But we'd still like to come. If that's okay with you. Something shifted again. Not a full circle moment. But a curve in the road I hadn't expected. I'd like that, I said. In the weeks that followed, family dynamics remained mixed. Old patterns don't dissolve overnight. But new threads began to form. Heather and I started grabbing coffee once a week, no pressure, just connection. It was a rhythm we'd never established before, and somehow it felt like the beginning of something steady. Jake invited me to his youngest son's school art show, a gesture that might have seemed small, but struck me as deeply sincere. Blake called a few times with genuine curiosity, asking about my projects, occasionally bouncing creative business ideas off me. There was no facade, just simple interest. Respect, even, and through it all, I carried one truth with me: what I had built in Tahoe was no longer just mine. It had extended outward, touching others, shifting perceptions, inviting new understanding. Even within my own family, Amanda remained resistant, often brushing off deeper conversations with practiced deflections. Her loyalty to our parents remained steadfast, blinding her to the long-standing dynamics that had isolated me. Brian and Lily withdrew quietly, neither confrontational nor supportive, just distant. Perhaps they didn't know how to engage now that old roles were being questioned. I didn't chase explanations or demand acknowledgments. Every sibling carried their own history, their own version of our shared upbringing. I learned to accept that reconciliation might not look the same for everyone. Around that time, I finally prioritized something I'd postponed for far too long: therapy. For years, I'd justified the delay by pointing to client deadlines or creative launches. But now, I was done pushing my needs aside. Dr. Michaels, a warm, perceptive professional, helped me untangle the web of identity, belonging, and ambition that had shaped me since childhood. She helped me see how my position as the family's outlier had carved both deep scars and hidden strengths. How striving for approval had once fueled my success but also confined my sense of self. One of the most remarkable things you did, she said during a session, was stop waiting to be invited. You gave yourself permission to build what wasn't offered. That's transformative. I sat with her words for a long time. And the more I reflected, the more I realized she was right. The Tahoe retreat wasn't just a creative endeavor or a personal rebellion, it was a reclamation. What truly caught me off guard, though, was the professional ripple effect. Guests had posted glowing testimonials, tagging me in heartfelt captions and sharing images of our sessions. Word spread quickly. Within weeks, my inbox filled with inquiries, from brands seeking collaboration to creatives wanting to join the next event. Designers, photographers, and even corporate teams reached out, intrigued by the blend of artistry and intention the retreat had embodied. My studio received unexpected attention from a leading design magazine, which published a full-page feature on my work, spotlighting the Tahoe retreat as a model for authentic community building. Invitations followed, to speak at conferences, participate in creative panels, and host workshops. I'd unintentionally launched a new facet of my career, one rooted not only in aesthetics but in connection. Then, 3 months after the retreat, I received a phone call that stopped me in my tracks. Amanda Eleanor, the familiar voice greeted me. It was my great-aunt, sounding more contemplative than usual. I've been reflecting, she continued. Your grandparents built that lake house with a vision, not as a trophy or a backdrop for stiff family photos, but as a place where imagination could thrive. They intended it to be a haven, not a platform. I nodded silently, memories rushing in, of pressed wildflowers, open sketchbooks, nights under the stars, and soft piano music drifting through the house. I could hear my grandmother's laughter in my mind, feel the strength of Grandpa Robert's arm around my shoulders. I've been speaking with the trust attorney, Aunt Eleanor said. As the last remaining sibling, I have influence over how the estate is used. And I've made a request: starting next summer, 1 week each year will be set aside for a creative retreat. Yours. To be directed however you see fit. I froze, her words sinking in like sunlight through fog. You're giving me a piece of that legacy? I whispered, my throat tightening. I'm honoring what Robert and Eleanor would have wanted, she replied. They saw your gifts before anyone else. It's time the family history reflected that. Tears welled in my eyes, too many emotions flooding me at once: gratitude, disbelief, validation. For so long, I had built in the margins, trying to create without a stage. And now, the very stage my grandparents had built was being returned to me, not through inheritance, but through trust. Your grandparents always recognized your light, Aunt Eleanor said softly. This retreat, this legacy, it's what they would have hoped for. Her words echoed in my mind as I hung up, the gravity of what she'd given me slowly settling in. A week later, the trust attorney confirmed the new arrangement. 1 week every summer, the family estate would officially be dedicated to a creative retreat under my direction. The most unexpected part? My parents didn't contest it. When I called to discuss the legal update, my father surprised me with a rare show of support. "Your retreat was impressive," he said after a pause. "Maybe it's time the property was used for something that matters again." That simple acknowledgement, while not an apology, marked a quiet shift. As I began sketching plans for the next Creative Minds retreat, this time on the land where I'd once gathered wildflowers with Grandma Eleanor and listened to Grandpa Robert's constellation stories, I found myself reflecting on how far I'd come. What began in sorrow had grown into something far greater than mere inclusion in a family event. I had created a living tradition rooted in authenticity, connection, and renewal. This journey had taught me hard-won truths, that rejection often reroutes us toward our purpose. That forging your own space can be far more meaningful than squeezing into someone else's mold. That chosen family, those who celebrate your truth, who honor your presence, can become your truest anchor. Sometimes, even more than blood. Most transformative of all, I realized that my value was never contingent on parental praise or sibling recognition. It had always been intrinsic, visible in my art, my relationships, and my decision to stand fully and unapologetically in who I was. No, the wounds weren't fully healed. Family patterns rarely unravel overnight. But something had shifted. There was a new awareness, an opening, a willingness to rebuild on different terms. I had drawn clear lines without severing ties, carved out sanctuary without sealing myself off. That alone felt like a quiet revolution. Staring out at the San Francisco skyline from my studio window, I thought of all the others like me, the ones pushed to the periphery, made to feel like an afterthought or a problem to fix. I thought of how the retreat had become more than a personal answer to pain. It had become a blueprint, a way forward for anyone seeking healing through creation rather than retaliation. This time, my vision for the upcoming retreat would be even more deliberate, more expansive, more inclusive. As I opened my laptop and began outlining themes, ideas flowed effortlessly. It felt as though my grandparents were beside me once more, guiding each stroke, reminding me of what mattered most. Sometimes, the most powerful reply to being told there's no room for you is to design a place so full of beauty, intention, and welcome that others long to belong. A place born not from anger, but from rooted self-respect. Not from rivalry, but from generosity. That's what I'd built. And in building it, I hadn't just shifted how my family saw me, I had redefined how I saw myself. Have you ever felt left out by the very people meant to embrace you? Have you ever been the one who didn't get the invite, the seat, the acknowledgement? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your journey. If this story struck a chord, hit that like button and subscribe. I'll be sharing more real stories of reinvention, resilience, and reclaiming power. And if someone you love needs this message, share it with them now. Remember, the people who truly see you may not always be the ones you're born to, but they are out there. You are never too much for the right room. And your worth? It isn't theirs to define. It's yours to honor. Thank you for watching. Keep building your own table, and never shrink to fit someone else's small seat.